The Golden Fleece, Part 7, from the Tanglewood Tales. Their breath scorched the herbage before them. So intensely hot it was, indeed, that it caught a dry tree under which Jason was now standing and set it all in a light blaze. But as for Jason himself, thanks to Media's enchanted ointment, the white flame curled around his body without injuring him a jot more than if he had been made of asbestos. Greatly encouraged at finding himself not yet turned into a cinder, the young man awaited the attack of the bulls. Just as the brazen brutes fancied themselves sure of tossing him into the air, he caught one of them by the horn and the other by its screwed-up tail, and held them in a grip like that of an iron vice, one with his right hand and the other with his left. Well, he sure must have been wonderfully strong in his arms, to be sure, but the secret of the matter was that the brazen bulls were enchanted creatures, and that Jason had broken the spell of their fiery fierceness by his bold way of handling them. And ever since that time, it has been the favorite method of brave men, when danger assails them, to do what they call taking the bull by the horns, and to grip him by the tail is pretty much the same thing. That is, to throw aside fear and overcome the peril by despising it. It was now easy to yoke the bulls and to harness them to the plow, which had lain rusting on the ground for a great many years gone by. So long was it before anybody could be found capable of plowing that piece of land. Jason, I suppose, had been taught how to draw a furrow by the good old Chiron, who, perhaps, used to allow himself to be harnessed to the plow. At any rate, our hero succeeded perfectly well in breaking up the greensward, and, by the time that the moon was a quarter of her journey up the sky, the plowed field lay before him, a large tract of black earth, ready to be sown with the dragon's teeth. So Jason scattered them broadcast and harrowed them into the soil with a brush harrow, and took his stand on the edge of the field, anxious to see what would happen next. "Must we wait long for the harvest?" he inquired of Media, who was now standing by his side. "Whether sooner or later, it will be sure to come," answered the princess. "A crop of armed men never fails to spring up when the dragon's teeth have been sown." The moon was now high aloft in the heavens, and threw its bright beams over the plowed field, where as yet there was nothing to be seen. Any farmer on viewing it would have said that Jason must wait weeks before the green blades would peep from among the clods, and whole months before the yellow grain would be ripened for the sickle. But by and by, all over the field, there was something that glistened in the moonbeams, like sparkling drops of dew. These bright objects sprouted higher and proved to be the steel heads of spears. Then there was a dazzling gleam from a vast number of polished brass helmets, beneath which, as they grew further out of the soil, appeared the dark and bearded visages of warriors, struggling to free themselves from the imprisoning earth. The first look that they gave at the upper world was a glare of wrath and defiance. Next were seen their bright breastplates. In every right hand there was a sword or a spear, and on each left arm a shield. And when this strange crop of warriors had but half grown out of the earth, they struggled, such was their impatience of restraint, and as it were, tore themselves up by the roots. Wherever a dragon's tooth had fallen, there stood a man armed for battle. They made a clangor with their swords against their shields, and eyed one another fiercely, for they had come into this beautiful world and into the peaceful moonlight, full of rage and storming passions, and ready to take the life of every human brother in recompense of the boon of their own existence. There have been many other armies in the world that seemed to possess the same fierce nature with the one which had now sprouted from the dragon's teeth. But these, in the moonlit field, were the more excusable because they never had women for their mothers. And how it would have rejoiced any great captain who was bent on conquering the world, like Alexander or Napoleon, to raise a crop of armed soldiers as easily as Jason did. For a while the warriors stood flourishing their weapons, clashing their swords against their shields, and boiling over with red-hot thirst for battle. Then they began to shout, "Show us the enemy! Lead us to the charge! Death or victory! Come on, brave comrades! Conquer or die! and 100 other outcries, such as men always bellow forth on a battlefield, and which these dragon people seemed to have at their tongues' ends. At last, the front rank caught sight of Jason, who, beholding the flash of so many weapons in the moonlight, had thought it best to draw his sword. In a moment, all the sons of the dragon teeth appeared to take Jason for an enemy, and crying with one voice, "Guard the Golden Fleece!" They ran at him with uplifted swords and protruded spears. Jason knew that it would be impossible to withstand this bloodthirsty battalion with his single arm, but determined, since there was nothing better to be done, to die as valiantly as if he himself had sprung from a dragon's tooth. Medea, however, bade him snatch up a stone from the ground. "Throw it among them quickly," cried she. "It is the only way to save yourself." The armed men were now so nigh that Jason could discern the fire flashing out of their enraged eyes when he let fly the stone, and saw it strike the helmet of a tall warrior who was rushing upon him with his blade aloft. The stone glanced from this man's helmet to the shield of his nearest comrade, and thence flew right into the angry face of another, hitting him smartly between the eyes. Each of the three who had been struck by the stone took it for granted that his next neighbor had given him a blow, and instead of running any farther toward Jason, they began to fight among themselves. The confusion spread through the host so that it seemed scarcely a moment before they were hacking, hewing, and stabbing at one another, lopping off arms, heads, and legs, and doing such memorable deeds that Jason was filled with immense admiration, although at the same time he could not help laughing to behold these mighty men punishing each other for an offense which he himself had committed. In an incredibly short space of time, almost as short indeed as had taken them to grow up, all but one of the heroes of the dragon's teeth were stretched lifeless on the field. The last survivor, the bravest and strongest of the whole, had just force enough to wave his crimson sword over his head and give a shout of exultation, crying, "Victory! Victory! Immortal fame!" when he himself fell down and lay quietly among his slain brethren. And there was the end of the army that had sprouted from the dragon's teeth. That fierce and feverish fight was the only enjoyment which they had tasted on this beautiful earth. "Let them sleep in the bed of honor," said the Princess Medea with a sly smile at Jason. "The world will always have simpletons enough just like them, fighting and dying for they know not what, and fancying that posterity will take the trouble to put laurel wreaths on their rusty and battered helmets." Could you help smiling, Prince Jason, to see the self-conceit of that last fellow, just as he tumbled down? "It makes me very sad," answered Jason gravely. "And to tell you the truth, Princess, the Golden Fleece does not appear so well worth the winning after what I have here beheld." "You will think differently in the morning," said Medea. "True, the Golden Fleece may not be so valuable as you have thought it, but then there is nothing better in the world, and one must needs have an object, you know. Come, your night's work has been well performed, and tomorrow you can inform King Aeetes that the first part of your allotted task is fulfilled." Agreeable to Medea's advice, Jason went betimes in the morning to the palace of King Aeetes. Entering the presence chamber, he stood at the foot of the throne and made a low obeisance. "Your eyes look heavy, Prince Jason," observed the king. "You appear to have spent a sleepless night. I hope you have been considering the matter a little more wisely, and have concluded not to get yourself scorched to a cinder in attempting to tame my brazen-lunged bulls." "That is already accomplished, may it please your majesty," replied Jason. "The bulls have been tamed and yoked, and the field has been plowed. The dragon's teeth have been sown broadcast and harrowed into the soil. The crop of armed warriors has sprung up, and they have slain one another to the last man. And now I solicit your majesty's permission to encounter the dragon, that I may take down the Golden Fleece from the tree and depart with my 49 comrades." King Aeetes scowled and looked very angry and excessively disturbed, for he knew that, in accordance with his kingly promise, he ought now to permit Jason to win the fleece, if his courage and skill should enable him to do so. But since the young man had met with such good luck in the matter of the brazen bulls and the dragon's teeth, the king feared that he would be equally successful in slaying the dragon. And therefore, though he would gladly have seen Jason snapped up in a mouthful, he was resolved, and it was a very wrong thing of this wicked potentate, not to run any further risk of losing his beloved fleece. "You never would have succeeded in this business, young man," said he, "if my undutiful daughter Media had not helped you with her enchantments. Had you acted fairly, you would have been at this instant a black cinder or a handful of white ashes. I forbid you on pain of death to make any more attempts to get the Golden Fleece. To speak my mind plainly, you shall never set eyes on so much as one of its glistening locks." And I think we're going to pause here, and we'll continue in the next video. Thanks so much for listening. Hey, please reach down, click like, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.